I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents.
As the Atlantic Yards project moves forward, we'll look at how it affects a nearby parish.
Brooklyn is different than Manhattan, and they want to make it another Times Square. We've already got a Times Square.
Keeping the faith at the Oscars, a film critic examines some of this year's nominated movies.
And a look at why confession is nothing to be scared of.
God is always there, welcoming us back. So there's nothing too big, and in a sense, there's certainly nothing too small.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It has been one of the most controversial construction projects in recent years in New York City. Plans for the Atlantic Yards project in Brooklyn's Prospect Heights were unveiled way back in 2003. Now, after years of delays, court battles, and confusion, the official groundbreaking on the site will be held next week.
That's right. The Atlantic Yards project will include the Barclays Center, which will be the home stadium of the relocated New Jersey Nets. Also included will be numerous high-rise apartment buildings, also commercial and retail space. And a major concern for many people is how the construction will affect the neighborhood, also its residents and parishioners of the nearby Church of St. Joseph. I found out today when I visited the neighborhood. The area of Prospect Heights along Atlantic Avenue and Pacific Street is lined with apartments, shops, and the Atlantic Rail Yard. But beginning next week, work will get underway to turn Atlantic Yards from this into this. A Kings County Supreme Court justice transferred privately owned land on the 22-acre site to the state this week. And area residents have mixed feelings about the plans that would bring NBA basketball, retail, and high-rise apartments to their neighborhood.
I'm not a fan. I live across the street and I work in Fort Greene. And Brooklyn is different than Manhattan, and they want to make it another Times Square. And we've already got a Times Square.
I think it's a corrupt disaster. They have no security plan for this project at all.
I think it might improve the neighborhood. It's kind of dull around here. So it might brighten it up.
I'm excited about the new people, all the activity, and at the same time I recognize that there are families and parts of the community that have been impacted by this.
Monsignor Kieran Harrington is pastor of the Church of St. Joseph on Pacific Street, less than a block away from the Atlantic Yards site.
The biggest impact here in Prospect Heights has been gentrification that's been taking place, escalating housing prices, making it less and less accessible. One of the benefits of the Atlantic Yards project is really the devotion of 4,000 units of housing for people, middle-income people.
But those benefits come with a price for some area residents. These apartments behind me here are set for demolition as the project at Atlantic Yards moves forward. And while Monsignor Kieran Harrington says it is regrettable that some of his parishioners will be displaced because of that demolition, he says when the project is completed at Atlantic Yards, the effect will be a positive one for Prospect Heights.
It's something that's needed by the neighborhood as well. And when you take a look and see the urban blight that has taken place, this project is really going to be an attractive way of joining two neighborhoods, Park Slope with Prospect Heights to Fort Greene, taking away the ugliness of a rail yard, an urban rail yard, and putting in its place housing for tens of thousands of people, and certainly allowing tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people a year to recreate here.
Sure. So what are you hearing from your parishioners, Monsignor?
Well, I think there's anxiety, again, about having to move. Yeah. There is really a very mixed feeling. I think there's some people who would be very angry, and then there would be others who would be more optimistic. There have been some complaints about traffic, but not related to the Atlantic Yards project. I think it's a result of the neighborhood changing.
Despite the change that is happening in the neighborhood, Monsignor Harrington says the church will continue to minister to whomever lives nearby.
And our challenge as a parish is to serve the people who live in our community, because they're our brothers and sisters, the ones we love, right? They're our immediate family. And at the same time recognize that people who are moving into the community are our brothers and sisters, and we have to love them.
Now, we contacted Forest City Ratner, the site's developers, to get their side of the story, but they told us they had no comment.
This is one of those things that has been on the docket for a while.
Long time. And, it's been, there have been court battles, as we said, and numerous delays and a lot of confusion among residents in the neighborhood. Some of the major bones of contention have to do with eminent domain and the
Right.
taking of a lot of that land by eminent domain. That's what a lot of the folks who are opposed to this have been saying.
And that isn't just a controversy here. I know that it is a controversy in other places as
Right.
well. You know, people are saying, well, I've had this land, I've had this space for so long, and who are you to say that you can just take it for the good or the development of others or, you know, for the greater population? And yet at the same time, it's that kind of a scale that has to be borne out.
Right, right. And that was kind of what Monsignor Harrington has said, that he has been kind of weighing there the good and the bad that are happening. And also, one person that we talked to out at Prospect Heights today in the neighborhood said that, you know, there are some security concerns as well.
Sure.
Because with a large stadium like that being located right there in the neighborhood, he was saying that there hasn't been a big security plan unveiled yet,
Sure.
and that's a concern for people there as well.
Right. Well, I'm sure that they're going to have to work on one and come up with one eventually. But anytime you're changing the demographics and you're building something like that, it's exciting for a lot of people, but those changes are going to also, you know, necessitate a little bit of friction as well.
Absolutely. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents coming up straight ahead.
We'll have all the day's headlines, including signs of hope amid the tragedy in Chile.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up just a bit later, think you've done something unforgivable? Well, we'll talk to a man who may change your mind.
But first, let's check out the day's headlines. A leading pro-life legislator says the Senate's health care bill is unacceptable. Michigan Democrat Bart Stupak tells Fox News that in its present form, the bill is going nowhere. Stupak says that because of the abortion language in the bill, as many as a dozen lawmakers who originally voted yes may change their votes. Stupak says any insurance company that includes abortion coverage should not receive public funds. Some strong words from a Catholic leader in Chile following the massive earthquake there. Archbishop Philip Bacareza Rodriguez says the looting and thefts that have occurred display an absence of faith. The Archbishop says he can understand, to a certain point, those who are hungry taking food from supermarkets. But he added that people are also stealing televisions and other things that he says, quote, have nothing to do with survival. Well, among the chaos in Chile, some heroes have emerged, including a 12-year-old girl whose quick thinking saved an entire community. We get more now from Colleen McEdwards.
Martina Maturana is only 12 years old, not even old enough for secondary school. But she didn't need books and teachers to react the way she did this past weekend. Within minutes of the earthquake, Martina's actions helped save the lives of people along the lower section of Robinson Crusoe Island off the coast of Chile.
At first, I didn't want to look out the window to see what happened. But when I did, I saw a big wave getting close. I yelled at my dad. He grabbed my little sister and we left the house. He told me, go, go, and I went to ring the bell.
The bell alerted neighbors to run to higher ground. In a matter of moments, the ocean swallowed up parts of Martina's town. Everyone survived. And now, days later, Martina's parents are beaming with pride over their daughter's heroic efforts.
The instincts at her young age are just amazing. She had the courage and awareness to know to ring the bell, even as the water kept getting closer.
She now knows that when we used to tell her that she was special, we were right. She is special. She always wanted to be famous, and now she is.
In fact, Martina is not just famous on Robinson Crusoe Island. What she did is making headlines around the world.
Colleen McEdwards reporting there. And a governor in Chile who visited Robinson Crusoe Island said nothing was left of it.
Back in the U.S., a group of Anglicans has officially decided to enter the Catholic Church. The House of Bishops of the Anglican Church in America will formally request to enter the church using the Apostolic Constitution introduced by Pope Benedict last year. Meanwhile, in England, one group is less than thrilled about the Pope's visit to their country later this year. The National Secular Society is petitioning the British government, asking that the Catholic Church, rather than taxpayers, pay for the visit. The society says it has 28,000 signatures. And finally, a new study suggests Catholic schools may equal a more successful student. The study by the SAGE Policy Group indicated students in the Archdiocese of Baltimore are more likely to get higher grades, graduate, and attend and graduate college than students in public schools. The study also showed Catholic school students have a higher likelihood of earning more money. And those results come amid some less than welcome news from Baltimore. The Archdiocese there has announced that it is closing 13 of its 70 schools.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up. Just ahead, a look at some obvious and not so obvious themes in this year's Oscar-nominated films. Welcome back. Well, the Academy Awards will be handed out on Sunday night, and some observers already predicting that the Oscar will go to
drum roll.
Faith.
Yeah, that's true. Faith, spirituality. They have actually 10 films this year, which is a bit unusual. They haven't done that for decades and decades. But a lot of the movies up for the Oscar this year deal with the faith issue, religion, or they have stories with spiritual themes really in them. Is this a trend perhaps? Well, to put all that in focus, I spoke yesterday with film critic Stephen Graydonis. Steve, thanks so much for joining us tonight on Currents.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're going to be talking about the films that are up for Best Picture for the Oscars, which airs on Sunday night. And we have the first one, which is really the biggest movie ever that does deal with a faith theme, as many of these movies have in them, Avatar. Tell us a little bit about what you see as the film critic that you are looking into this movie.
Avatar is a film that has been the subject of some controversy, particularly among Christians and Catholics. I think that the controversy has been a little bit overblown. It's a space opera, obviously, science fiction film, but a film with some definite spiritual and religious themes. Some people have pointed out that those themes tend to be a little pantheistic, of identifying nature with the divine rather than seeing nature as creation and the work of a transcendent creator. But if you dig a little deeper, it's not really pantheism so much as it is that the divine is part of creation, not really the same as creation.
Okay, so it's a part of it. It's not necessarily the actual thing itself.
Yeah, so as Christians, I think we can look at this movie and say, you know, what if God had created a world like this? And it's an amazing spectacle that he's created. That, I think, is the real reason that people are going to see it. Sure. I think people are coming out of this movie amazed at his visuals and not really so much enthused about pantheism or anything like that.
Okay, very well. And then A Serious Man, a movie that I caught and discussed earlier on Currents this year. Tell us a little bit about what you see as the issues there. Obviously coming from the Jewish perspective, but what are the main faith issues in that movie to you?
Serious Man, a movie that couldn't be more different from Avatar. This is from the Coen brothers, who are grandmasters of the absurd. This is an existential, dark comedy that asks why bad things happen to good people, whether there are any good people, whether it matters that bad things happen to them, whether God is there at all. It's a modern-day story with distinct echoes of the book of Job, of Ecclesiastes, of the story of David and Bathsheba, among other things.
What's going on? Well, I didn't want it, and Danny said that he could use it.
That is so unfair.
I'll tell you what's unfair. What's unfair is them not letting me play in their card game.
Why give him the money? You know what he spends it on?
I know about the records.
Records? You think he buys records from Mike Fagel?
Well, he's not saving up for a nose job.
What a brat!
So, a movie from two filmmakers who I think don't really have anything in the way of faith necessarily, but I think are possibly still looking at or haunted by hope.
By hope?
And asking the right questions, if not necessarily coming up with the right answers themselves.
Sure. They're still seeking. All right, fair enough. And then The Blind Side is a popular film. I know Sandra Bullock is also up for Best Actress, I believe, in that one. Talk about the Christian faith as it's portrayed in that movie.
Yeah, this is the ringer. This is the real surprise. And the fact that it beat out Invictus to be one of the 10 nominated films for Best Picture, I think, is a real shocker.
Sure.
This is a wholesome, uplifting, heartland kind of film about an evangelical Christian couple, salt-of-the-earth, God Bless America types who give a helping hand to an underprivileged but oversized young man from the hood who learns to play football. It's a lot of fun as a movie. My only misgiving about it is that the film is more about the couple and less about the athlete, who I think is what the story should really be about, and is in fact the subject of the book that the movie was based on.
So they kind of shifted it and portrayed, beefed up her character a little bit more perhaps than his, but still, like you said, an uplifting movie. We also would maybe want to talk a little bit about the moral discussion, not necessarily just religious or religious based, that Up brings up, and also Up in the Air.
Well, two very different movies despite similar titles. Up from Pete Docter, the latest film from Pixar, is one of the most beautiful portraits of faithful, lifelong married love that I have seen in any movie, let alone an animated film. And the fact that it does it all in the first 10 minutes is just really shocking. Pixar has gotten increasingly good at creating movies that the whole family that can watch but really hit grown-ups in the gut, and Up does that in spades.
And Up in the Air then is a bit of a contrast. It's much more modern.
Absolutely. Up in the Air, along with another film that's been nominated, in Education, both take a look at the fallout of infidelity and of choices in the area of intimacy that are contrary to the faith and to human good. Up in the Air takes a look at a rootless man played by George Clooney who lives in airports and sort of free from any kind of human contact and examines the consequences of that in his life.
Right. Well, that's about all we have time for today, Steve. But what, before we go, is your pick?
For Best Picture? The movie I'd like to see is Up. The movie that I think will win is The Hurt Locker.
Okay, very well. Well, thank you so much, Steve Greydonis, for being with us here today on Currents.
Thanks very much.
And that is film critic Stephen Greydonis. So what do you think? Who's going to take home the Oscar for Best Picture? Because those are all the Best Picture film nominees.
Right. I'm going to, well, that I don't know, because I really haven't seen a lot of the films that are up for Best Oscar. That's just me.
There's a lot of buzz about.
Well, there's been a lot of buzz about Crazy Heart.
Yeah,
I know.
Well, that too. Jeff Bridges,
There's been of course, a lot of buzz about Precious as well.
Yeah, that too. Neither one of those.
Which one do you think?
I think it'll go to Avatar probably, or The Hurt Locker, which is another one.
Avatar's one that it's been, because it was such a hit. Because a lot of the Oscars, that a lot of films lately, in more recent years, haven't been as huge box office smashes that have gotten the best
Right. Well, that's why they
Oscar.
expanded it from 5 to 10, because this year there are 10 pictures up, as I mentioned earlier, for the Best Picture. The thing is the one movie that I did see, because really I haven't been to the theater in a while, which was kind of, unfortunate for me, but I will catch them soon, is The Serious Man. And that, the Coen brothers, it was just really an interesting movie, because what they were dealing with the concept of faith was that, is God in existence? And if so, where is he? And it was really that question that we all sort of come about and face at certain times.
Right.
And they, of course, do it from this dark comedy perspective, and they do it in a way that only they can in their kooky way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it does beg that question. And it's sort of in the Jewish faith as opposed to the Catholic faith or whatever, but we're talking generally about issues of faith and spirituality in the films this year. And there certainly were plenty of them pointing to this moral theme.
Right. And we've talked about that piece before here on about that movie, or I should say before here on the show, and the spirituality of different films this year. There are a lot of them, so we'll definitely keep an eye on
I know my eyes are going to be glued to the TV on Sunday night, that's for sure, because I won't be walking the red carpet, unfortunately. Not this year.
Once again, we're not nominated.
No, we'll have the popcorn at home. Meantime, stay with us. There's more Current straight ahead.
When we return, looking for forgiveness, we've got just the place for you.
What I usually say when somebody sits down is, God is happy that you're here.
Well, last night, our Natalia Ortiz took us behind the curtain to talk with Father Dave Dwyer about the ins and outs of confession.
A little behind the scenes there. And tonight, she brings us the second half of that conversation.
You could say the Sacrament of Reconciliation is a two-parter. It's not just about confessing your sins. There's more. And how does penance play a role? What is penance exactly, and how does it fit into the whole confession experience?
Penance is, as you point out, I mean, it is a necessary function of the sacrament. It's one of the pieces of the sacrament. So without it, the sacrament isn't full. It'd be like if we just read the readings at Mass and didn't actually do the Eucharist. There's missing a part. But penance, what we believe, is not our way of paying back God. It's not God has the big clipboard and go, aha, now that you've done the penance, now I forgive you. We believe that God forgives us first. And because of the magnanimousness of God's love and mercy, we genuinely want to respond with something wonderful, something positive. There's a story in the Bible of Zacchaeus, who was a little man who was a sinner, climbed up in a tree to see Jesus, waves to Jesus, and Jesus says, I want to dine in your house today, which for that time was Jesus expressing this great mercy and forgiveness. And in response to that, what Zacchaeus says is, I want to give back everything that I've stolen. It's kind of a spontaneous reaction to something that we could never repay. Him giving back everything he's stolen is in no way repaying that great gift of Jesus dining with him, but it's a way in which we move towards God by moving toward others, really.
So is there such a thing as a sin that's too big or too small to confess?
No.
Okay.
No, certainly, I mean, to your first question, there is nothing, we believe, but looking at all of Scripture and tradition, that there is nothing that God will be up there saying, well, that's the one. Nope. God is always there welcoming us back. So there's nothing too big, and in a sense, there's certainly nothing too small. The Church would more require the celebration of this sacrament for those large sins, what we call grave sins. God completely embraces us. The story of the prodigal son, which many people are familiar with, is a wonderful image of this sacrament, where when he was still far off, he was kind of tail between his legs and thought he would just go back and be a hired hand. The father comes running out and says, it's so good to have you back, and throws his arms around him, no matter what he's done. I mean, he did something pretty nasty for those days, taking all of his inheritance, disowning his father, and yet the father is there embracing him. Nothing too big, and nothing too small, in the sense that the Church says that what this sacrament primarily is for is those big sins, those grave sins. But there's nothing wrong with coming on a regular basis and saying, this I really need to unburden myself. I want to get even this small sin off of my chest.
So how do you convince people that have been away from the Church for a while that confession is actually important?
Certainly during the season of Lent, I experience people coming into the confessional that say, it's been 15, it's been 20 years. Oftentimes, it is the Holy Spirit that convinces them that it's time. It's not me making a presentation of people going, that's a good idea, I should do that. It is really God's Spirit within us, welling up and saying, it is time to be rejoined to the Church. And no matter how long it's been, what I usually say when somebody sits down is, God is happy that you're here.
Actually, you've convinced me, so I think I'm going to go make an appointment with my parish.
And a reminder, the Archdiocese of New York is hosting a 24-hour confession event over the weekend, this weekend. If you'd like to find out a little more, just visit currentsny.net and click on Writing the Wave.
Nice to go behind the curtain or behind the screen there, and it's always nice to remember to sort of, have that mindset to remember to confess and to be penitent, as we've talked about, and that, to remember that there is forgiveness there that's available.
That's right. We can always move forward, and once we kind of connect and get that off our chest or off our back, I think it's oftentimes a lot easier to do so.
Absolutely. Father Dave's a great guy to talk to about it.
He is.
Well, that's it for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, our Natalia Ortiz, who you just saw there, will be bringing you a special edition of Currents, looking at the annual Catholic Appeal, exactly what it is and where the money goes.
Meantime, remember, you can always check us out online at currentsny.net, and you can also follow us on Twitter and become a fan on Facebook. Until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime.
On the Facebook. And I'm Matt McClure. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.